Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genres and talk about an album that's been impressing me lately and that I want to recommend to you guys that I think is worth your time and attention and is often featuring some of the artists that I've cared most deeply about in the progressive rock world over these past 20 or so years that I've been into the genre. So today I have a really cool one. I'm talking about the new Lunatic Soul album, The World Under Unsun. Lunatic Soul is a project formed by Maurice Duda. It's basically his solo project outside of Riverside. That's his big band that many of you probably have heard of. A prog metal act that's one of my favorite bands of all time. Just absolutely incredible. Every release they have is just perfect and so pristine sounding, and they started a bit more raw in that prog metal sound and have adapted and changed over the years into a more prog rock sound, but I feel like Lunatic Soul is Maurice Duda's outlet for more creative expression that goes beyond what he's able to do with Riverside, because Riverside is so tied into that prog metal style. They experiment and do things a little bit different as well. I feel like, as I mentioned, that the more recent Riverside albums have strayed away from the more metal type sounds from their first four records really. And their most recent one, Identity, even experimented with almost an 80s soundscape. So they do. You can tell that Maurice Duda is just a very creative individual who has a lot of ideas in his head, and some of them just don't fit into the framework of Riverside proper. And so this is a great project that he's put together that allows him to explore a different side of his sound. And this side of his sound that's explored here is basically more of an electronic ambient type feel, but fused with like folk and rock elements that make for a really fascinating stew of music that can be hypnotic and features these like loops and these repeating figures, but there's building textures and things that make it more exciting as the track builds and continues. He adds new instrumentation on top of it and gives it this cinematic type feel and soundscape. And I really love what he's put together here. And I feel like this record is somewhat of the culmination of this whole project that he's been building on ever since he started it back in 2008. So this is the 8th studio record for Lunatic Soul. They had the self-titled record in 2008, Lunatic Soul 2 in 2010, Impressions in 2011, Walking on a Flashlight Beam in 2014, Fractured in 2017, Under the Fragmented Sky in 2018, and Through Shaded Woods from 2020. So a great discography already, and this is the culmination of everything that he's put together. These albums are in a similar world. They inhabit the same conceptual theme across multiple records. Talking about the circle of life and death is how they frame it. A cohesive story in which a solitary artist / traveler journeys between life and death. So you're getting a continuous story through all these records, and this is the culmination, the finale, the grand ending to this 8-album story arc. So definitely a lot on its shoulders to perform well and to close this cycle out in a really great way. And I think it does just that in a perfect way. It is able to take influences from all of these other Lunatic Soul records, which have their own individual feel and different nuances to each of them. The one that I'm most familiar with is Through Shaded Woods, which was one of my favorite records in 2020 and featured more of a folkier aesthetic. It had more acoustic instrumentation, and I thought it was a fascinating switch from the more electronica kind of feel of some of his other records in this space. So it really created for another flavor, even though it's the same style, the same kind of looping, ambient, textured effect, but in a more folky vein. Was a really interesting marriage of different sounds and styles. And I think he brings some of that on board this record, while also bringing in, of course, the other different elements, those more ambient, electronica, more, looping, beats and prominent bass work that he's known for in these records, and it all comes to full fruition. It's a double record, and it's quite a lengthy record. It's about an hour and a half long, split into 2 discs, basically, 2 45-minute pieces of music. And I've heard a lot of reviewers say that that's probably one of its biggest setbacks in a way, is the length of it is just so massive. And of course, when you're talking about an album of this length, there's going to be parts that may not excite you as much as other parts. You may think in your mind, well, this could have been cut down a little bit. This thing goes on a little bit longer. And I think a lot of people have this instinct of, oh, well, if this was just crafted into one 45-minute record, they could have cut out all of the excess and just produced something really excellent in that final cut of record. But I'm cut from a little bit of a different cloth in the way I think about this stuff. To me, like, more is better. I'm really excited to get more material from my favorite artists and to hear every single corner of their musical exploration of what they're trying to accomplish. And I think every song on this is a gem in its own way, has something going for it that makes it unique and stand out on the record. So I'd hate to cut or lose anything, even though I understand where people are coming from who think that, you know, more streamlined experience would work better for them. But I like when artists are able to deliver something really expansive and allowed to really explore their creativity in a big way. And some of my favorite records of all time are double records, honestly, throughout history. Just something personally that I really enjoy is getting this full feast of material to really dig my teeth into, and it just gives me a lot of time to be able to spend with this record and to have so many different layers to uncover as I unravel this record. And if you need to, like, take it piece by piece and just listen to sections of the record at a time to be able to digest it well, I think that's fair, and everyone gets to have the experience they want with it. So I'm not bothered by the length of the record. I think it fits, especially this feel that he's going for, where these pieces are very expansive, very cinematic. They take their time. They have a lot of breadth to them. And I think for them to have the impact that's intended, they have to be expanded. They have to go on for quite some time. They have to build slowly to come to these fantastic climaxes that many of these tracks come to. So I think it's a great journey of a record. There's so many highlights. Every track, like I mentioned, has something to really pick out and find interesting. I love the title track that starts the record. Beautiful ambiance, prominent bass lines, great vocal harmonies, twinkling acoustic guitar accents, and this really driving electronica beat behind it all. You could find it a bit repetitive, but there's so many cool sounds that are introduced and that bring life to this piece. One of the best aspects of this record to me is Marius Duda's bass work, because he's really primarily a bassist at heart. That's his main instrument, and that's where these pieces really live and die, is by their bass line and how that drives the song. And they're very intricate and interesting, and like, that's really the first thing that stands out that you grab onto, that gives you the feel of what the song is, based on that bass part. And so it's really cool as the track list continues. Loop of Fate is an early favorite with some tribal drumming and Eastern influenced instruments. There's a cool sax sound towards the end that's really cool. Great progression throughout the track, this infectious repeating groove. Loop of Fate is a great title to describe this. I love The Prophecy, which was an early single. Angelic piano and vocals, great beautiful melodies, fragile and lovely, but still has that sonic build that I really appreciate from the record. One of the longer pieces is Mind Obscured Hard Eclipse, which starts out a bit more cinematic, kind of this epic movie soundtrack kind of feel to it, before we get an excellent bass line and a groovy feel to it. There's a fuzziness to the bass, some cool haunting vocals, and more of that sax work towards the end of this piece, and great textured keys. I like these extended pieces. This one's almost 12 minutes long and gives lots of room to breathe and to develop, and it's just a wonderful experience to let it unfold and wash over you. I used to be a bit more bored by this kind of music, honestly, but as I'm aging, maybe I'm getting a bit more mature, or maybe I've listened to enough of this that I'm starting to really understand it and develop a taste for it. But I just find it really soothing and a great experience to just sit back and let this wash over me. I think it's just really beautifully rendered, and this is a fantastic track to personify that feeling throughout the record. Hands Made of Lead, that starts the second half of the record, is one of the best tracks as well, one of the more overtly proggy tracks, especially towards the end. I feel a bit of a Riverside feel, with touches of that 80s aesthetic that they were playing with on Identity. Some wonderful sax sounds in the background, some fuzzy bass, some great swirls of textures as this builds and leads to a fantastic piece of music. Ardor, that comes after it, feels like it could have been plucked straight from Through Shaded Woods, with that folky aesthetic and kind of a woodsy rhythmic feel. I think Game Called Life is another highlight of the album. Mystical sounding, plucked strings and chanting style vocals. Music box kind of style piano leads to an electronica bassy beat. A lot of that hypnotic electronica loops and sounds, and ends with a really ramped up cool bass groove. Just really fantastic. Self in Distorted Glass is another highlight, with a very similar vibe to it. And some great cool guitar soloing towards the end that adds a bit more of an edge. And the absolutely gorgeous The New End that closes the record is a wonderful piano ballad that just brings the heart and the feeling and closes this out in a perfect way. So, and there's plenty of other great songs peppered throughout. Like I said, it's a lengthy record, so I can't touch on every single track necessarily, but just take my word for it. They're all beautiful. They all have their own voice, and it all works together well. I love albums where each piece has its own feel and quality, but taken as a whole, it all holds together in a way that makes sense. And I think this record does that. And it's basically feels like a greatest hits record for everything Lunatic Soul has done up to this point, and is a wonderful cap on this part of the musical journey that they're partaking in. So Mariusz Duda continues to be one of my favorite musicians in modern music and modern prog. And he does a lot of work on this record. He plays most of the instrumentations here, doing vocals, bass, piccolo bass, acoustic guitar, piano, keyboards, percussion, programming. We also get a few extra musicians who do drums and saxophone and soundscapes on the record, but mostly, of course, this is the brainchild and genius of Mariusz Duda, and I hardly recommend it. It's a lengthy record. It may be a bit to get through, and I can understand people who feel like it's a bit much to take in, especially in one sitting. Maybe it's better to break it apart and treat it like it's two separate albums, but the experience is worth it. It's worth that journey because there's so many great soundscapes, so many great textures and layers to everything, and it is just soothing and almost meditative at sections. And I think that's a cool vibe that this project is going for, that takes it in a different direction than what Riverside is doing. And I really respect that from Mariusz Duda as an artist, that he doesn't just do a solo project that sounds vaguely like Riverside. He does something totally different that has its own feel and its own vibe to it, and I really respect him for his musical genius and coming up with this project. And this is a great celebration of everything Lunatic Soul has been about through the many years that they've put out music. So that's what I have for you guys today. Hopefully you appreciated the review. Let me know if you are going to check this one out, if you've heard it already, if you've listened to the singles. Let me know your thoughts on the Lunatic Soul project at large. I'd be curious to hear about it, but I've been really enjoying my time with it, and I think it's a fabulous record this year that deserves all the ears and attention that it can. So thank you guys for joining me. Enjoy the music, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in a future episode. Bye, everybody!